Okay, guys, so today we're going to be talking about sharks, and we're going to go through our usual things. We're going to do our introduction, then we'll talk about some basics about sharks. We will talk about shark species, then we'll go through our activities and cover some resources that you can use. So you guys know me, I'm Aiden Lizzie's mom, Megan, and I work at scientist.com, and I have some degrees in science, and I really love teaching and sharing cool facts with you guys. And we're talking today because the pandemic has changed all of our lives. So we're using these STEM classes as a really good way to connect with each other and to still learn new things and hopefully learn things that you guys can use later in life as well.
Hi, Megan.
Hello. Welcome. Okay, so we're going to go over some basics about sharks now. So what are sharks? Well, sharks are animals. They're in the kingdom Animalia, and they're in the phylum Chordata, which you guys might remember means that they have a notochord when they're developing. So it develops into like a spinal cord. So this is basically saying that sharks have a backbone. And then they're in the class Chondriichthyes, and ichthy is a word for fish. So they're a type of fish. And then they're in, finally down lower, they're in a superorder, which means it's kind of a cluster of orders that all go together. And I'm going to show those to you. So there's about 8 different orders of sharks that are living today. There's about 4 orders that are extinct. So meaning that they're not around anymore. But the sharks are divided up into 2 big groups, depending on whether they have an anal fin. And then it's divided by things like their gills, how many gill slits they have, their spines, kind of, their anatomy, and then some different things about, if they're short snouted or long snouted. And you can see some of the sharks have really interesting shapes. So they're kind of flatter. And these are they look like rays almost. So there's some really cool, interesting sharks on here, but the ones that we're most familiar with are probably these guys down here. So sharks actually come in a really wide range of sizes. So the whale shark is normally about 12 meters or 39, close to 40 feet long. But they can be up to 18 meters or 60 feet long, which is absolutely huge. And their average weight is around 9 tons or 20,000 pounds. So these are actually really, really, really big sharks. They're not the biggest animal in the ocean because we have things like blue whales, but they are pretty huge and they are the biggest shark. Then we have the smallest shark in the ocean that we know of, and that is called the dwarf lantern shark, and that one is all the way down here. And this little guy gets to, if at his longest, is 20 centimeters or about 8 inches. So you could hold it in your hand. It's a very little teeny tiny shark. And then in the middle, we have some other species that we're familiar with, like the basking shark, and here's a great white. Those are around 23 feet. And then a lot of the more common sharks, nurse sharks are 13 feet, mako sharks are 8, and then black tip reef sharks are down to 6.5 feet. And then they just kind of get smaller from there.
What about megalodons?
Yeah, so megalodons were actually way bigger than any of these, but they are extinct now. Megalodons could open their mouth so wide, it would be like a 9 to 11 foot opening. So they were absolutely massive. Yes.
I think there's like a very, very, very little shark that it sticks to your skin if you put it in your skin. Like, you have to pull it so it gets soft.
Interesting. I didn't know that. So sharks have a bunch of really interesting anatomy. And remember, anatomy is like the shape and form and function of parts of our bodies. So they have really interesting bodies, and we can kind of loosely divide them into 3 parts. So the head, the trunk, and then the tail area. And this is more of a general shark, but one of the things that you'll notice is that they have these things called spiracles. And spiracles are really funny. They actually allow like fresh water into the shark's body. They also have the gill openings, which is how they breathe. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about this important part, which is their mouth. So shark teeth are very interesting. They actually are embedded in the gums instead of into bone. So like our teeth are directly affixed or directly attached to our jaws. And shark teeth are just stuck in their gums. And so they're constantly replaced throughout their life. So they're they're a little bit more loosely attached than ours. And they have multiple rows of replacement teeth. And they kind of grow in like a little groove in the inside of the jaw. And then they just keep moving forward, almost like a conveyor belt. And
Megan,
yes.
is it true that the sharks only go for you if they see blood?
Sharks actually don't like to eat people in general, but they are attracted to the smell of blood. That's one of the ways that they find their prey.
They just normally, if they do attack you, it's because like they mistake you for a seal since their eyesight isn't very good.
Exactly. Yeah. So we'll talk a little bit about their senses. But when they bite things, oftentimes their teeth can break off. So they basically just have teeth that continuously move forward in their mouth. And some sharks can lose 30,000 or more teeth over the course of their lifetime. So usually teeth are replaced somewhere between every like 8 to 10 days up to several months. For individual teeth. And they're usually replaced one at a time as well. So it's not like an entire row of teeth fall out at once. It's just a kind of a tooth here or there. And then the shape also of their teeth really depends on their diet. So those that are eating like hard things like mollusks, so clams or crustaceans like crabs that are kind of harder to bite through, those sharks tend to have flattened teeth that are used for crushing. And the sharks that feed on fish have kind of needle-like teeth for gripping. So like this shark over here. And then sharks that feed on really big prey, like mammals, have pointed lower teeth that they use for kind of gripping. And then their triangular upper teeth are serrated, like a kind of like a knife almost. And that helps them cut. So, and then obviously if they don't eat food like that, like if they eat plankton or like the basking shark, they have teeth that are so small that they don't really do anything. So inside their bodies, they have a really interesting skeleton. So shark skeletons are really different from fish that have bones and from vertebrates or like us that live on the ground or on the earth out of the ocean. So sharks are really something called cartilaginous. So they have skeletons that are made of cartilage. So cartilage is the kind of flexible stuff that we find like in our nose, and our ears have a lot of cartilage in them. And so that's really what shark skeletons are made out of. And they're also made of connective tissue. And you might remember from our skeleton lesson that connective tissue helps to connect parts of our bodies. So the cartilage in their skeletons is really flexible, meaning that it can bend without breaking, and it's durable, so it lasts a long time. But what it does is actually act at like an assistance to buoyancy, or buoyancy means you can like float in the water basically. So because it's not so dense like bone, sharks are able to float more easily, and it also saves weight, which saves energy because they don't have to work so hard to move their bodies. The one interesting thing is that sharks actually don't have a rib cage like we have, and our rib cage is what we use in part with our diaphragm to help us breathe. So if sharks are stranded on the land, they can actually be crushed under their own weight and be unable to take anything in basically. Okay. So their skin is also really interesting. So sharks actually have kind of weirdly rough skin, and they have a network of kind of scales almost that surround their body. And the interesting part about these, like if you look at them, you can actually see up close when you get into the microscopic view that they're kind of rough on the edges, and it's pretty neat. It's actually they're called dermal teeth, which is really interesting. Dermal means skin. So they kind of look like teeth that are on the skin, which is funny, but they also reduce the kind of turbulence or the amount that water mixes around them when they're swimming. So it is actually really helpful for them when they swim. And it also, the way it's arranged around their bodies is kind of like almost a second like safety net for them. It's kind of like a second skeleton, and their swimming muscles actually attach to this, which is really cool. Their tails can be really, really different too, which I found to be very interesting. So if you look here, there's a lot of different shapes. And the one that we usually think of, or the one that I draw, usually if I'm drawing a shark, is a tail like the great white shark. That's usually what I think of as a shark tail. But tails are really important to the shark because they help determine the way that they move. So if you look up here, the tiger shark has like a really long top part of the tail and short on the bottom. And then this cookie cutter shark just has a very strangely shaped tail. So these are actually used for different things. And these fin shapes help them move in certain ways. Like the tiger sharks with the large kind of upper part makes them kind of cruise along fairly slowly, but then they can have really quick sudden bursts of speed. And the tiger shark also needs to be kind of agile or move easily in the water. And it has to be able to like twist and turn because it's when it's hunting. But other fish that maybe, you know, don't need to move as fast or move in different ways have differently shaped tails. They also have some really cool gills. So if you guys have ever seen the gills of a fish, they're kind of lined up in these little like reddish pinkish rows inside, and they look really interesting. I think they almost look like the bottom side of a mushroom.
Megan.
Yes.
When the sharks catch the fish, don't they go out to those where they breed? Yeah.
Oh, breeding grounds?
Yeah. Don't
Yes.
they escape?
Some sharks have certain places where they like to eat and certain places where they like to breed, and they will actually migrate around and travel at different times of the year, which is pretty cool. But when...
I have a question.
Sure.
Is it true that if a shark stops swimming, they'll sink? So they have to keep swimming continuously?
Some sharks do kind of lay on the bottom, and they don't have a swim bladder like other fish do. So the swim bladder in fish usually kind of holds air and allows them to float in certain parts of the water. Sharks actually use their liver for that, which is weirder than others because they kind of hang out on the bottom. But they do need to keep moving because the way that they get oxygen out of the water is by it passing over the gills that you see here. Mm-hmm. So if they stop moving, they won't be able to breathe, which is kind of a bigger issue. Mm-hmm.
I think that what Carmen meant is that when that type of shark eats a little eats a little fish, doesn't it escape through those little holes?
Oh, through these holes? No.
Yeah.
Oh, the breathing. Okay, I get it now. Yeah. So no, they can't. These actually aren't connected. So
Okay.
Yeah. So this part is for basically this is how they breathe, and so those tubes are separate. So here, I'll show you in the next picture actually. So here you can see that, you know, coming through the mouth, there's basically different tubes, just like we have different tubes. So if it goes into the mouth, then it goes into their like stomach and their intestines. And if the water that's passing over the gills gets oxygenated and then goes into the bloodstream. So it's actually separate parts, kind of like us. So their interior anatomy or internal anatomy inside of them is also very different from humans. So if you notice that the shark has kind of a really weird looking stomach. So when they eat stuff, it actually goes into this really like long, awkward stomach, and it has different types of intestines than we have. So they sometimes eat really weird stuff. And if it's something that doesn't kind of sit right with them, they might not even swallow it all the way. And the shark can either kind of throw that up, or they can actually turn their stomachs inside out and then push the unwanted stuff out of its mouth. which is quite interesting. So one of the biggest differences here with them is that even though they have this kind of like long, strange stomach, they have a lot shorter intestines than we do. And that's because they have a special valve inside. So it kind of makes their intestine function like a longer intestine within that short section, which is pretty cool. And then all of their waste comes out of one hole, the cloaca. So if you remember from our lesson about birds, they also have a cloaca. And so basically everything just comes out there. Onto their senses. So sharks have fairly complex brains, and they can process a really wide range of senses. So we usually think of our senses of, smell, sight, sound, touch, and taste, but sharks have 2 more than we do, which is pretty cool. So sharks can smell and smell very well, and up to 2/3 of their brain is dedicated just to being able to smell. So they're really sensitive to smells that are important to helping them live longer. And those smells are things like what their predators smell like, what prey smells like, and then what a mate or a partner would smell like. So some sharks can detect the blood of prey animals from like a really huge distance and at really small concentrations. So meaning like one teaspoon of blood in 10 or in a million teaspoons of water. So that's like having a teaspoon of blood in an average sized swimming pool, and sharks can pick that up. Sharks also, we talked about them being able to see a little bit earlier. And one of the issues with shark sight is that light doesn't travel very well through water. So they need to be able to try to see as much light as they can. So their eyes are positioned on either side of their head, which means that they can see in almost all directions. But they actually can't really see close up very well, which is quite interesting. So they see best at about 15 meters. And like cats, actually, sharks also have something called the tapetum lucidum. And we talked about that a little bit in the cat lesson, but it's that reflective layer that's inside their eyes. And so kind of how cats' eyes almost seem to glow sometimes, sharks' eyes do the same. They actually can, as far as sound, they can hear fairly well, and they're really sensitive to low frequency sounds. So basically what that means is that they can hear animals that are wounded and like thrashing around in the water really well. And their ears are actually located on either side of their head, and they're behind their eyes. And they don't really look like much to us. They just look like 2 little holes, but they're made out of cartilage tubes that are filled with fluid and lined with hair. So the sound waves cause the little hairs to vibrate in the fluid, and then the brain is able, their shark brain is able to figure out what those sounds are. They do have some sensitivity to touch. They have nerve endings under their skin, just like we do, but some of them also have these special things around their mouth that they can kind of dig in the sand for prey with and sense touch that way. Their teeth are also pressure sensitive, so they can feel biting down on things. Sure.
Okay, so basically I heard that if you see a shark and it's got you, kick it in the nose because they're sensitive there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so their noses are a very sensitive area. They have a lot of nerve endings there. And
also,
yep.
I heard that some sharks, they lay eggs and some give a live birth.
That's also true.
And Brandon and I, we were at the beach like a month ago, and we found a shark egg. But we cracked it open and it was empty.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so it was just the leftovers. Yeah.
Yeah, but there wasn't any like crack in it before. Like it was a full out shark egg.
Oh,
I dug it up when I was digging a hole at the beach.
That's cool. So one of the problems with sharks is we talked about them, if they bite people, they're actually looking for seals and things like that in general and will let go. And part of that is because they have sensitivity in their teeth, but they obviously don't have any hands. They don't have hands and arms to like feel around. So they use their mouths to feel things, kind of like when puppies are learning. And so if they're curious about something, they might take a test bite just to kind of explore things. They also have a really good sense of, let's see, electroreception. So this one is pretty cool, and it's something that we can't really do, but they have a sensory system with receptors or like kind of receivers for signals that are all over their head. And they're like little tiny pores or holes, and they're super, super sensitive, and they can detect really faint or small electrical fields. So basically they can orient themselves like a compass almost. And they also use this to find prey that's hiding. So like hammerhead sharks have a really good sense of electroreception, and they'll use that to find prey that are hiding under sand, like stingrays and things. And then finally, they can also detect pressure changes. So pressure is basically how much the water that's surrounding them is pushing on them. And as you can imagine, when they go deeper, there's more and more water above them. So the pressure is bigger and it's like heavier on them. And they have these special lines down their body called the lateral line. And basically, they use this to sense the pressure around them and then also changes in the pressure. So that can help them find prey, and it can also help them navigate in the darkness. Okay, so this part is really interesting. I want to tell you a little bit about the shark lifespan, and then we'll talk about reproduction. So most sharks live 20 to 30 years. That's like a normal age. The spiny dogfish, which is a type of shark, can live over 100 years. Whale sharks can also live over 100 years. But does anybody have a guess what the oldest shark is?
120-ish.
That's a good guess. So I have a surprise for you guys. This one here, the Greenland shark, they're estimated to live between 300 and 500 years. So one specimen, or one...
That's long.
Yeah, one shark that was studied in 2016 is believed to be 392 years old, but they said they could be off by as much as 120 years. So that means at the youngest, the shark is 272 years old. Pretty incredible that they can live that long. And that's this guy right here. And as you can probably tell from the name, they live kind of around Greenland, up in those Arctic conditions in very cold water. So when they do reproduce to make new sharks, as you mentioned before, they can do a couple of different things. So there's different words for this, but basically most sharks...
Megan.
Yes.
We saw one of those eggs.
One of these pouches like this?
Yeah. Like that.
Mm-hmm.
In the aquarium.
Yep. So there's a couple of aquariums around here that have them too. And yeah, and someone saw some at the beach too. So these are actually, people call them mermaid pouches. But basically this means that their fertilized egg is inside this egg case that almost feels like leather, and that helps to protect the baby. And these cases are usually attached to things, so they're not just free floating. So these little like squiggly parts are usually wrapped around something. And sharks that have these egg cases, it's called they're oviparous, which means that they lay eggs. But some sharks have eggs, but then the eggs hatch inside the adult shark before the baby comes out, which is kind of silly. And then some actually they birth babies without eggs. So here's an example of a shark coming out of the mother, not developing in an egg, but being born. And with those, the sharks are born like ready to go. They're just miniature versions of adults. So you can see in the left, when the shark is in the mermaid's pouch, it's got a huge yolk on it, which is what they get nutrition from. But if the sharks come out of the mom, if they're kind of born live, then they're basically ready to swim off and go on their own. And
They're born with teeth, and if they're in there with siblings and the mother hasn't fed them in a while, then they will eat their siblings.
So the mom doesn't really have a good way to get like food, obviously, to the babies besides her eating. But like sand tiger sharks and things like that will consume other babies while they're kind of inside the mom. And it's thought that way the sharks that survive are the ones that are best suited to their environment, because they're very aggressive. And then they also get that extra energy as well. So to help them get this energy, they have to eat, right? And most sharks are carnivorous, meaning they eat meat, but some sharks filter feed on like plankton. So you can see here's a whale shark. And whale sharks use suction to basically take a bunch of plankton and small fish into their mouths. Other sharks eat like different kinds of fish. They may eat seals and things like that, but they'll also eat things that are actually already dead. So in this picture, this is a great white shark that is chomping on a dead whale. And this actually happened off the coast of Boston. People saw this and took a bunch of pictures of it. So some of the other sharks will feed on things like squid. They'll eat, fish and crabs and all sorts of things. So some sharks also are cooperative feeders, which actually means that they work together to hunt in a pack, and then they herd and capture the fish all together. So they're like in a big group. Okay, so now we're going to talk about a couple cool shark species that I thought you guys might want to know more about.
Excuse me, Megan?
Yes.
Do sharks also eat dolphins?
I think they can, but I think more often dolphins can actually kind of gang up and attack sharks. They've been known to kind of come in groups and swim really fast at sharks and try to hit them in the gills to kill them.
Yeah, they kick up the sand so that the shark can't see them, and then they like hit it.
Yeah, pretty cool. Dolphins are very smart and very cooperative. So, okay, so this guy is the great white shark, and this is probably one of the most famous sharks. And these guys get really big, and they also hunt for super cool stuff. Like, so the picture of the seal that we saw here, this shark is fully breaching, meaning it's all the way out of the water to get that seal. And so great white sharks are in the Pacific Ocean. So they're off the coast of like California, but they're also seen in the Atlantic. And there's some really common grounds where they live kind of around South Africa.
Megan?
Yes.
Talking about dolphins, it made me think of 3 dolphins that were playing in the beach next to my school.
Oh, that's very cool.
I did a report on great white sharks, I think.
Oh, really?
2 years ago, maybe.
That's fun. They're very cool. Okay, so the next one we're going to talk about is the tiger shark. So tiger sharks are really neat, and they actually have stripes that are almost like a tiger, which is how they're named. Oh, this picture got really small. Sorry about that. This is the bull shark. Bull sharks are especially interesting because they can actually go into what's known as brackish water. So brackish water means that it's like a mix of salt water and fresh water. And they've actually been found at 2,000 miles up the Amazon River. So they will sometimes travel into American rivers as well, like the Mississippi. Okay, this guy is the great hammerhead shark. And we talked a little bit about their senses earlier, but with hammerheads, they have this elongated head that has a lot of sensory organs on it so that they can help find, it helps them find rays and stingrays and things that are under the sand for them to eat. And then their eyes are also on the ends of their head. I think there's like 6 or 7 different species of hammerheads, and I believe most of them are endangered as well. So this silly little guy is called the cookie cutter shark. And the cookie cutter shark is named that because the bites that they take out of their prey are round, like if you were cutting out a cookie. So they almost seem like lampreys when they feed on stuff. So they leave like these kind of round holes where they kind of grind into their prey and chomp on the stuff inside. I thought this kind of he looks like a little cute happy shark though. Okay.
It's good over to a boat. Do you want to see him again?
Megan?
Yes?
He looks small.
Right now on our front patio, there's a 2-foot rattlesnake.
Oh, that's not good.
2 foot.
Ooh, scary. Well, I hope you stay safe.
That cookie cutter shark looks small.
Yeah, that one is a pretty small shark.
Are they normally that small?
Mm-hmm. Yep, they're just a smaller species. So this guy, the whale shark, is the biggest species of shark. And even though their average weight is around 20,000 pounds, they can weigh up to 50,000 pounds. But they're actually really kind of calm, and that's because they eat mostly plankton and other little fish that they kind of gulp while they swim. And whale shark meat is actually eaten by people in parts of Taiwan and the Philippines where they are common, but more often people don't really catch whale sharks, and they actually like to see them in the water. Fishermen like to see them in the water because that usually means there's lots of plankton and tuna and things nearby for them to catch. Let's see, this silly looking guy is called a lemon shark, and they're really actually light brown. I think people name them because sometimes they're almost kind of a lemonish yellow, but doesn't really look like it to me. But these guys grow 8 to 10 feet, and they live in shallower water, so water that's not quite as deep. And they live along the Atlantic and the Pacific coast of the US and South America, and then off of Africa as well. And these sharks are really interesting because they're super social, meaning they like to live in pods or groups, and they have even been shown to be able to learn things from each other. These are one of the species that give birth to live babies, and they also like to eat mostly like little fish around coral reefs. So this is a common one to see when people are diving. This weird guy is called the goblin shark, and I think you guys can probably guess why he's named that. These are kind of really strange sharks. They're super rare, and they live between like 300 to 4,000 feet below the ocean surface. And scientists have... Oh, go ahead.
I think that we learned about this in 3rd grade.
Cool.
So is this the one that can stretch out his jaw?
Yes. So they eat in like a really weird way. It's kind of like a slingshot. They call it slingshot feeding, where they throw out their lower jaws at like really, really fast speed and grab stuff and then kind of suck it back in. But we don't have to worry about these because they mostly eat like octopuses and other creatures that live at the bottom of the sea. This guy is also really strange looking. This is the Tasselled Wobbegong, and this shark is actually really, really well camouflaged. So they live in coral reefs off of Australia.
That doesn't look like a shark.
Right? Isn't that crazy? They can grow up to 4 feet long, and the way that they hunt is by camouflaging themselves and then just waiting for things, and then they just kind of jump out real quick. So it barely looks like a shark. It kind of looks like plants and stuff around the ground or corals, right? So
it looks like they have plants hanging off their face, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So they use that to camouflage themselves so that fish swim by and don't notice them. And then they can grab squid fish and soldier fish that they like to eat. And they like to eat at night as well, which also helps to camouflage them.
Megan?
Yes.
To me, it looks more of an octopus than of a shark.
Yeah, it does kind of remind me of the pictures of the octopus that were camouflaging themselves, right? And changing the texture of their skin.
Okay. Megan, but it also, maybe if you look at the distance, it might look like maybe a rock or some plant.
Yep, exactly. So they're hoping things don't notice them and then they can jump out and eat them. And then this one, again, is the Greenland
longest living shark.
Yes. And they like really, really cold water. So I told you before, they live kind of up in the Arctic. Well, they like swimming in water that is less than 10 degrees Celsius or less than 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's really cold water. And in the summer, when it starts to get warmer, they dive down like 3,000 feet into the ocean. And hopefully, or the idea is that that helps keep them cool. And they can grow up to like 25 feet long, and they eat things that are found in the deep parts of the ocean, like lumpfish. And there have been reports that people have found things in their stomachs like reindeer and horses. So actually, people eat Greenland shark. It's a delicacy, I think, in Iceland. So in 1859, some fishermen also claimed that they found a human leg in one. So they were saying that this shark ate a person, but it's never been proven. So I'm not really sure that's true. They mostly just chomp on fish and things. Okay, so now we're going to go through.
1859?
Yep.
That was a long time ago.
Yes.
Why do the Greenland sharks like to be cold?
One of the thoughts is that it actually slows down their metabolism and their aging. So that's part of why they might be able to live so long, is because they live in these cold waters, but also they evolved there. So that's what they're best adapted to. Okay, so for activities, our small friends can draw a shark of any species. They can draw a shark eating, or a shark egg case, or a mermaid's pouch. School friends, you guys can write a few sentences about the anatomy of sharks. You can create a comic about sharks eating, or you can draw a shark species of your choice and then label at least 5 parts. And then for our older friends, you can write a paragraph about the shark's senses. You can create a comic about the adaptations of the shark, any kind of adaptation you want, or you can draw a shark species of your choice and label at least 10 parts. And then I will share some resources with you guys as well. There's some cool articles and charts and things in there if you are interested in reading them. Okay.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Guys, that's all.